Okay, quick review. In sociology, when we look at the symbolic interaction theory, we can take an example like, say, for instance, patriotism. We've got up here, we've got the Statue of Liberty, we've got the American flag shaped in the United States, and we've got the White House. All right, all of these are great signs of patriotism. Other things might include the Pledge of Allegiance, which we say every day. If you look at schools, every school has a flag. And there are other examples of patriotism everywhere. Now let's take that a step further. With patriotism, all of these images also evoke some of that patriotism, whether it's the 9/11 attacks or the firefighters cleaning up and taking care of it almost immediately afterwards, or even the military. All of these images speak to the United States and what that symbolism is and what it means to be a citizen of the United States and also somebody that is patriotic. If we move forward and we look at the functionalist perspective or the functional analysis perspective, we can look at it very specifically as everything being a piece of the puzzle. If we look at the Earth, it's a number of puzzle pieces. That is what functional analysis is. Everything fits into that piece of the puzzle that makes up the Earth. So let's take school. School as a function, as a standalone, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Let's just send a bunch of kids to a building and they can go learn, and then when they're done, we can do, well, nothing. School has to serve a purpose. It's interconnected. We're connected to, well, maybe college. Maybe school's purpose is to go to college, but maybe it's not. And then from college, then what? Well, from college we go out to the business world, and that's where we go to work. So the idea is our school prepares you for more school, which then prepares you for college. Or perhaps our school prepares you for work right out of the gate. Either way, the other thing that we have to look at are the manifest and latent functions of any general part of society. Whether it's school, the manifest functions are intended consequences or intended results, and the latent functions are unintentional or unintended results. So a manifest function of school might very well be to prepare you for college, but an unintended result might very well be that in school you learn, say for instance, who you are or what your personality is, because you're hanging out with a number of different people with different personalities. If we look at schools and what they're designed to do today, that's very different than, say, what schools were designed to do 50 years ago, 100 years ago. 50 to 100 years ago, if we were looking at the functional analysis, we would still go from school, but at that point, the idea was to go from school to factory. One of those manifest functions of schools back in, say, the 1950s was to prepare all citizens to be relatively similar in a skill set, to be able to go out and work either in the business world, which wasn't very common, or to be able to go out and work on an assembly line. It wasn't as important to be able to find out problem solving. That wasn't the idea of schools. Today, one of the major goals of schools is to teach things like critical thinking, to teach problem solving, to be able to teach you the skills that you'll need to be able to succeed in any environment outside of this building. If we move on and we look at the conflict perspective, a quick review of the conflict perspective kind of tells us that, once again, you've got Karl Marx, and you've got, if we look at slavery. In slavery, Karl Marx would say that the capitalists were oppressing slaves for their own profit. Soon, that changed from slavery to an era of sharecropping, where African Americans would rent a piece of land but be sharecroppers for the same people that they used to be slaves for. When sharecropping fell out of style to a degree, we moved to a system of Jim Crow laws where segregation was the rule. Again, it created a two-class society in the United States where you had white folk and black folk separated quite simply because of race, although it was done so on a legal basis in the South, and in some parts even as far north as, say, parts of Missouri. From there, when that again starts to fall out of favor, we soon in the 1950s, as Jim Crow is slowly moving out of vogue, soon we see white flight in the development of suburbs, where white people are able to afford, say for instance, nicer housing out in the suburbs, where African Americans weren't able to do so because of their situation or the jobs they weren't able to get, and they stayed in the inner cities. Inner cities are a good example of still some of that conflict perspective taking place even today. If you notice, the system isn't really that different. There's still a division in social classes. It's certainly today, by all means, more on social economic status than it is on race. However, the line of oppression might very well suggest that those in power aren't necessarily the government. We outlawed slavery, and sharecropping took over. Sharecropping was kind of frowned upon by the government, and Jim Crow took over. When the Jim Crow laws were overturned by the Supreme Court, a lot of white people moved out to the suburbs where African Americans couldn't afford housing. In the inner cities now, the government isn't doing a ton to help the inner cities, and neither are other people in power, other people that have that money. So going back to Marx might very well say that the oppressors are the capitalists, are the ones with the money, and the oppressees, or the proletariat, are the ones that are always struggling to gain more power.